Hey folks, walk with me. Anthony Jeselnik. I think the day that this video is going out is the day that his new comedy special, Bones and All, releases on Netflix. Unless I totally botched that, but I think so. But I've been a fan of Anthony Jeselnik for years. I think the character that he plays is tremendous. I think far outweighing the character he plays, his joke writing skills and his presence on stage, which may partially be the character he plays, but his joke writing skills and his presence are just tremendous. They stand up to, I would say, basically any living comic. I think he is one of the best living comics that we have currently. And I'm actually not going to fixate this video on why I think he's a great comedian. What I actually think he's doing as, maybe I'll call it a public service presently, is he is going on podcast after podcast and interview after interview as he is promoting this new special. And he is saying some very honest truths as I see them. I think some people see it as him just sort of like throwing grenades, right? Tossing bombs and just like blowing stuff up, maybe Cat Williams style. But I actually don't think it's that. I think he's very authentically presenting a point that a lot of people have been feeling for the past, say 5 years, maybe folks more, but 5 to 7 years, something like that. But this is him taking aim at people who present themselves as a comedian but make a ton of money, too much money, I think, as he said it, on podcasting, right? And that they are so overblown in the podcast space that it fuels and feeds their ticket sales for their comedy, but as a standalone art, skill, product, however you want to see it, that the comedy that they produce and the event that they provide the viewer, just by standards of stand-up comedy, are relatively lackluster, right? So basically they're making a ton of money off of podcasts. They then use that money and the fans that they have from podcasts. I mean, many have openly talked about this. Tom Segura comes to mind. That people come to shows not necessarily because they're fans of stand-up or even a particular person's stand-up, but because they are a fan of that person's podcast and they just want to support them. They want to see what the stage show is all about, whatever it is. And therefore, they can get away with drawing huge crowds and putting on a show that if they didn't have the podcast, or if they didn't have some other draw, right? They essentially have like a sales and marketing funnel and they call it a podcast. And they, on the backs of that, just are able to proclaim that they are one of the greatest stand-up comedians today. Or some of them probably proclaim one of the greatest stand-ups of all time. And it's just insane. Because were they to simply have that placement and that product as a standalone, I think it would fall tremendously short. And he's calling a lot of that out. Now, I've obviously got on my own soapbox here and said a lot of things that maybe he doesn't agree with or that he doesn't particularly say, he being Anthony Jeselnik. But this is sort of this is the bone in my body that what he says resonates with. And also the self-importance of it all. I think he also has this quality to like dismantle that we're just all gonna sniff our own farts mentality of like, the Rogan sphere comes to mind. But just of these stand-ups who are like, we do the most important thing out there. We allow people an opportunity to laugh. We are the last bastion of hope against the woke mob, making sure that free speech in this country doesn't die. Oh yes, you are the Paul Revere's and the Thomas Jeffersons and the George Washingtons upholding the constitutional standards of our free republic. Insane. Just that and it's not, it would be one thing, I suppose, if somebody else said that about you and you just kind of like let it slide or even sort of agreed with it. But to just like flaunt that, to throw that out there, that you are that bastion of hope and freedom, it's just all sorts of cringy, and just the self-importance of it all is, to me, kind of anti-comedic. And then sort of like feeds into that whole concept of, yeah, you all aren't actual stand-up comedians that could, as a standalone, be a comedian. You have to have all of these other avenues and ways by which you draw people in, which, yes, you might be good at, but it doesn't lead to you then being one of the best comedians ever or one of the best living comedians. Two very different things. 2 or 3 or 4 or 10 very different things. And I think that he shines a bright light on that, and I think that he calls out where people are just lazy, right? That they regurgitate, reutilize stuff from podcasts, or they act in ways that like just don't make sense, given the fact that they are now twice as old as they were when they started that shtick, which like he, I think admittedly has a character or a shtick, but his holds up. Like, it doesn't matter if that person is 20 or if that person is 60. I think it still is, it's different than some shticks out there. But so I think he calls out some of it where it's like lazy, right? That because you don't have to stand on your laurels as a comedian, you have all of these other funnels by which you get people in the door, you can get away with being relatively lazy. And so I just wanted to applaud him. I'm sure his stand-up is going to be, or his special is going to be great. But I'll certainly be tuning in. And I'm just thankful that he's a voice that is in the room presently, that isn't just so fixated on where do I make the next 20 million or $100 million, and let me just focus on that, and then let me still just claim what a tremendous stand-up I am and how important I am to society. Thank goodness that he is some voice of reason beyond the lunacy that is that. All right, folks, the videos this week are going to be a little bit shorter. I don't know when you're going to be watching this. If you're watching this later in the year, this won't make as much sense, but it's Thanksgiving week here in the US. And there's all sorts of activities happening, and there's traveling happening, and kids are off school, and so on and so forth. So it's just a bit more chaotic on this end. So I'm going to try to keep the videos a little bit shorter this week. But hey, maybe that's just overall a good thing. Maybe I will repeat myself less and explain things in a less long-winded way. So 9 minutes is what we got in on this one. If you walked with me, and if you didn't, I don't care. I still appreciate you watching until the end here. And as always, I will see you in the next video.